The air in the engineering bay was thick with the smell of hot metal and ozone. It was a familiar smell to Chul, one that clung to his clothes and his skin even after his shift ended. All around him, the cavernous space echoed with the sounds of work. The high-pitched whine of plasma torches, the deep thrum of power converters, and the shouted instructions between mechanics of a dozen different species. Chul wiped a greasy hand across his brow, leaving a dark smudge. He was focusing on rerouting a coolant line on a small cargo shuttle when a shadow fell over his work. He looked up to see his senior, Gina. She was a few years older than him, with a calm, unreadable face that always seemed to be observing everything at once. "The primary coupling is misaligned by half a degree," she said, her voice quiet but clear despite the noise. She pointed a slender finger at a joint he had just sealed. "It will fail under maximum thrust. Redo it." Chul felt a flush of embarrassment. He had been sure it was perfect. But he had learned, over the past few months, that Gina was never wrong about these things. She was the best structural engineer on this whole section of the station, maybe on the whole station itself. He nodded, not arguing. "Yes, Gina." As he began the tedious work of breaking the seal, a new wave of noise erupted from the main bay doors. A team of large, hulking figures marched in, escorting an anti-grav sled that carried a massive, damaged component. Chul recognized their species immediately, the Jaxians. They were reptilian, with thick, scaly hides and eyes that held a permanent look of disdain. They were also famous for building the toughest warships in this part of the galaxy, and for being incredibly arrogant about it. The lead Jaxian, a commander whose name chime translated to Volk, scanned the bay as if he had just stepped into a garbage dump. His gaze swept over the human engineers with open contempt. "You!" Volk's voice was a low rumble. He was looking at the senior-most technician, a man named Park. "This is a Mark 7 Jaxian primary thruster housing. It has a Class 3 fracture. Your facility will repair it immediately." Park looked at the component, a complex piece of machinery as big as a ground car. "Commander Volk," Park said, trying to sound confident. "This is a complex piece. We'll need to run diagnostics, model the stress points. It could take a few cycles." "Unacceptable," Volk snapped. "We are on a diplomatic timetable. You have one standard cycle. Use your primitive tools and fix it." A tense silence fell over the work crew. A job like that properly took a week. Doing it in a day was risky. A mistake could cause a catastrophic failure. No one wanted to be responsible for blowing up a Jaxian warship. Chul watched, feeling a knot of anxiety form in his stomach. This was going to end badly. Then, a soft voice cut through the tension. "I will do it." Everyone turned. It was Gina. She had walked away from Chul's station and was now standing beside the massive thruster housing. Her head tilted as she examined the jagged crack running through its core. Volk looked down at her, his lip curling. "You? The junior technician? The engineer?" Gina corrected him, her tone flat. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were still tracing the lines of the fracture. "And I do not need a cycle. I will need 3 hours." A disbelieving murmur ran through the Jaxians and the human crew alike. Chul's mouth went dry. 3 hours? It was impossible. Commander Volk let out a harsh, grating sound that was probably a laugh. 3 hours? Foolish human. Your overconfidence will be your failure. Gina finally looked at him. Her expression was the same as always. Calm, focused, and utterly peaceful. It was unnerving. "The fracture is not a simple stress break," she explained, her voice still quiet, forcing everyone to lean in to hear. "It is a resonant propagation. Your ship's damping field is out of alignment by 0.01%. It created a standing wave that shook this housing apart. You can patch the crack, but it will just crack again next to the patch. You must change the component's inherent frequency." Volk stared at her, his disdain momentarily replaced by confusion. "What are you babbling about? Our systems are perfect." "They are not," Gina said simply. It wasn't an insult, just a statement of fact. She turned to Park. "I need a Class 4 plasma welder, a kilo of crystalline beryllium composite, and a high-frequency harmonic stabilizer." Park just blinked for a second, then nodded vigorously, barking orders to the apprentices who scrambled to get the equipment. What happened next, Chul could only describe as a kind of art. While the Jaxians stood by, arms crossed and skeptical, and the human crew watched in awe, Gina began to work. She didn't move with frantic speed, but with a slow, impossible precision. Every movement was fluid and had a clear purpose. There was no wasted motion. She didn't just weld the crack shut. Instead, she used the plasma torch to etch an incredibly fine, spiral pattern into the metal around the fracture. It looked like a delicate tattoo. She then applied the beryllium composite not as a patch, but as a fine dust, tracing it into the etched lines with a focused energy beam. Finally, she attached the harmonic stabilizer to the housing and entered a series of commands. She wasn't fighting the break. She was, Chul realized, convincing the metal to be whole again in a different way. She was teaching it to vibrate in harmony with itself, to disperse the energy that had tried to tear it apart. After 2 hours and 50 minutes, she put her tools down. The component looked different. The crack was gone, seamlessly fused, but the beautiful, swirling pattern remained, gleaming under the bay lights. "It is done," Gina said, wiping her hands on a rag. Commander Volk strode forward, a scanner in his hand. He ran it over the repaired housing. The scanner beeped, and his face, for the first time, showed something other than arrogance. Pure, unadulterated shock. "Structural integrity is at 112% of original spec," he muttered, his voice barely audible. He looked from the scanner to Gina, then back again. "The harmonic readings. They are perfectly balanced. How did you know about the damping field?" Gina just looked at him. "The fracture told me." She turned her back on the stunned Jaxian commander and walked back towards Chul, as if she had just fixed a leaky pipe and not performed a minor miracle in advanced materials science. The Jaxians collected their component and left the bay, their earlier bluster completely gone. They were quiet, almost subdued. The bay was silent for a long moment after they left. Then, everyone started talking at once, the noise level rising in a wave of excited chatter. They were all looking at Gina. But Gina was already back at Chul's station, looking at the coolant line he was still struggling with. "You are pressing too hard," she said, her voice returning to its usual, instructive tone. "Let the tool do the work. Guide it, don't force it." Chul just stared at her. The calmness, the impossible skill. It was far beyond just being a good engineer. He had heard stories about people from the war, veterans who had done things that normal humans couldn't even imagine. He had never really believed them, but now, watching Gina, he began to wonder. Who was this quiet woman he worked with every day? She wasn't just an engineer. She was something else entirely, something that had chosen to hide itself here, in the noisy, greasy belly of a space station, fixing the things that others broke. And for the first time, Chul felt a shiver of awe, mixed with a tiny, budding seed of fear. The next day, the engineering bay felt different to Chul. The constant noise and smell were the same, but the air itself seemed to hum with a new energy. Everyone was looking at Gina. The other mechanics watched her with a new kind of respect, their glances quick and full of awe. They didn't crowd her or ask her about the Jaxian thruster. They just gave her a little more space, a little more quiet when she passed by. Gina, for her part, acted exactly as she always did. She moved from one task to the next with the same quiet focus. She was checking the power output of a generator when she called Chul over. "The fluctuation is in the primary regulator, not the core," she said, pointing to a diagnostic screen. "See the pattern? It's a feedback loop from the secondary systems. Everyone blames the big part, but the problem is often in the small connection." Chul nodded, trying to absorb the lesson. He found it hard to concentrate. His mind kept replaying the image of Gina etching that perfect spiral onto the Jaxian metal. He wanted to ask her about it, to understand how she knew what to do, but the words stuck in his throat. Her calm silence felt like a wall. After their shift, they had to go to the station's administrative sector to file the official report for the Jaxian repair job. The admin sector was a different world from the engineering bay. Here, the air was cool and filtered. The floors were clean, and the light was soft. Different species in clean uniforms walked through the wide corridors, their voices low. It was a place of rules and paperwork. Chul walked beside Gina, carrying a data slate. He felt out of place, his work clothes still smelling faintly of grease. Gina seemed unaffected. She moved through the bright, orderly halls with the same calm she had in the noisy bay. They reached the office for work order finalization. It was a small room with a wide window looking out at the stars. A friendly, bird-like attendant took their slate and began processing the forms. Everything was quiet and normal. Then the door hissed open behind them. Chul turned and felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Commander Volk stood in the doorway, his large frame blocking the light from the hall. His scaly face was set in a deep scowl, and he was not alone. Behind him was Task Force Leader Kale, the head of the station's internal security. Kale was a tall, slender being from a species known for its strict adherence to procedure. His skin was a pale gray, and his large, dark eyes showed no emotion. For security guards in dark armor stood behind him, their weapons held ready. The friendly atmosphere in the room vanished. The bird-like attendant froze. Volk pointed a thick, clawed finger directly at Gina. "That is the one!" His voice boomed in the small room. Task Force Leader Kale stepped forward, his movements precise. He held up an official data slate. "Engineer Gina," he said, his voice flat and formal. "You are hereby charged with sabotage of a Galactic Union allied vessel and acts of interstellar terrorism. You will come with us immediately." The words hung in the air. Sabotage? Terrorism? Chul's mind went blank with shock. It was impossible. He found his voice, A shaky, "What? No, there's a mistake." Gina did not speak. She simply turned from the counter to face the group. Her face showed no surprise, no fear. It was as calm as when she was looking at a broken machine. Volk took a step closer, his smell of oil and musk filling the space. "Your repair was a trick," he snarled at Gina. "The component failed during a high-speed test run. It nearly tore the engine apart. You planted a harmonic bomb, set to activate under stress. You tried to destroy a Jaxian warship." He thrust his own data slate toward Kale. "The data does not lie. See the energy spike just before the failure? It matches the signature of her device." Chul looked at the screen. There was a complex graph and a sharp, dangerous-looking red line peaked at the moment of failure. It looked convincing, but Chul knew it had to be wrong. "She fixed it," he insisted, stepping slightly in front of Gina, though she didn't seem to need his protection. "She made it stronger than before. You saw the scan. That scan was part of her deception." Volk roared, his patience gone. "She fooled my scanner just as she fooled all of you." Task Force Leader Kale looked between Volk's angry face and Gina's peaceful one. The evidence on the slate seemed clear. A high-ranking commander was making a formal accusation. His job was to follow procedure. "The evidence presented is sufficient for an arrest," Kale stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. He nodded to the guards. "Take her into custody." The armored guards moved forward. Their heavy boots echoed on the floor. The lead guard reached for Gina's arm. Chul's heart hammered against his ribs. This was all happening too fast. It was a nightmare. He saw Gina's career, her freedom, everything, about to be destroyed by a lie. But Gina did not look at the guards. She did not look at Volk. Her eyes were fixed on Task Force Leader Kale. She held up her hand, not in a fighting stance, but a simple, open palm gesture that meant, "Stop." Everyone froze. The guard's hand hovered just inches from her arm. Then, she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it was like a laser cut through the tension. It was clear, calm, and absolute. "Stop." The word hung in the silent room. No one moved. All eyes were locked on the unassuming woman in the grease-stained coveralls. She turned her gaze from Kale to Commander Volk. Her eyes, usually so focused on machinery, now seemed to look right through him. "This is a farce built on wounded pride," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "I will not be arrested." Volk began to sputter with renewed anger, but she continued, her voice silencing him. "However, to demonstrate the fallacy of your claim." She paused, and in that pause the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Chul felt a strange sensation, like the air pressure had just changed. He wasn't looking at a mechanic anymore. He was looking at something else entirely. She finished her sentence, and the words were so strange, so unexpected, that for a moment no one understood them. "I'll allow one strike. Choose wisely." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a heavy, thick silence that seemed to swallow all sound. The gentle hum of the station's life support systems, which was always there in the background, suddenly vanished from Chul's awareness. The only thing he could hear was the frantic beating of his own heart. He stared at Gina. Had she really just said that? One strike? Choose wisely? It made no sense. She was facing down for armed guards, a security commander, and a furious Jaxian warrior. She was not a fighter. She was an engineer. She fixed things. She didn't challenge them to fights. Commander Volk was the first to break the silence. A low, guttural sound started deep in his chest and erupted into a harsh, disbelieving laugh. The sound was ugly and out of place in the quiet office. "One strike?" he boomed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think this is a game, human? You are under arrest. Your tricks are over." He looked at Task Force Leader Kale, expecting him to give the order. But Kale was not moving. The tall, gray security chief was staring at Gina with a deep and unusual curiosity. His large, dark eyes were narrowed, studying her. He had seen many reactions in his career. Fear, anger, pleading, violence. He had never seen this. This was not the bravado of a guilty person. This was the calm of someone who held all the cards. Gina did not look at Volk. She kept her eyes on Kale, as if he was the only one in the room who mattered. Her offered hand remained up, not in a fist, but open. A gesture of both limitation and allowance that Chul's mind was racing. This was a disaster. She was making everything worse. He wanted to grab her and tell her to stop, to just go with them and let the system prove her innocence. But he was frozen in place, held by the sheer strangeness of the moment. Volk, enraged by her indifference and Kale's hesitation, took a threatening step forward. "I have had enough of this. Guards, seize her." The guards, clad in their dark, intimidating armor, began to move again. Their heavy boots clanked on the floor. The lead guard reached once more for Gina's arm. This time, Gina moved. It was not a big movement. She did not jump back or raise her hands to fight. She simply turned her head and looked directly at the guard whose hand was about to close on her. It was just a look, but it was enough. The guard stopped. His hand froze in mid-air. He saw something in her eyes that his training had not prepared him for. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A simple, clear warning, like a flashing light on a control panel. Your procedure is flawed, Task Force Leader, Gina said, her voice still perfectly calm, as if she was commenting on a wiring diagram. You are acting on false data. You are attempting to arrest the wrong person for a crime that did not happen. The data is clear, Volk insisted, shaking his data slate. The data you fabricated is clear, Gina corrected him, her tone still flat. The real data, the data of the metal itself, tells a different story. You are ignoring it. Kale finally spoke, his voice slow and measured. You offer a strike. Explain your meaning. He was deeply confused. This was not in any rulebook. Gina shifted her gaze back to him. You believe his claim that I weakened the part. He believes his own pride, which I wounded by fixing what his people could not. This is the core of the conflict. So, I will allow one demonstration of force. One attempt to strike me. The result will prove which of us is correct. Chul finally understood, and the understanding terrified him. She wasn't offering to fight. She was offering to be a test subject. She was turning her own body into a piece of evidence. But how could letting someone hit you prove anything except that you could get hurt? Volk's confusion twisted into a cruel smile. He completely misunderstood. He thought her offer was one of combat. A chance for him to vent his rage personally. You hear that? He growled at Kale. She admits her guilt. She wishes to fight her way out. I accept her terms. These are not terms for a fight, Commander, Kale said, his brow furrowed. This is highly irregular. It is simple, Gina said. He gets one free hit. After that, this ends. Volk puffed out his chest. He was massive, a trained warrior. She was a small human woman. In his mind, it was not a test. It was an execution. He could easily break her with one blow. I choose myself, Volk announced, a triumphant gleam in his eye. He cracked the knuckles of his large, leathery hands. I will deliver the strike myself. The security guards looked at Kale, unsure of what to do. Their job was to prevent violence, not to stand by and watch it. But their leader had not given an order. Kale looked from the confident, smirking Volk to the utterly serene Gina. He saw no fear in her. He saw only certainty. His professional curiosity warred with his duty. Finally, he gave a slow, single nod to his guards. Stand down. Observe. The guards stepped back, forming a loose circle. The bird-like attendant had long since ducked behind the counter. Chul stood alone, his fists clenched, his body tense. He wanted to scream to stop this madness. Volk took a heavy step forward, then another. He loomed over Gina, blocking the light from the ceiling. He grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was what he wanted. A chance to punish the human who had embarrassed him. You should have just come quietly, he sneered. Gina did not answer. She did not get into a fighting stance. She simply stood there, her arms relaxed at her sides, her feet planted firmly on the floor. She looked up at the giant reptile, her face as calm as if she was waiting for a bus. She was ready. The air in the room was electric. Chul felt like he couldn't breathe. He watched the massive Jaxian commander loom over Gina. Volk's body was tensed like a spring. All his weight and anger focused into the moment. This wasn't an arrest anymore. It was a public execution, and Gina had ordered it herself. Volk let out a sharp, aggressive hiss. It was the sound of attack. His right arm, thick as a tree branch and covered in tough scales, pulled back. His fist, a hard, bony hammer, clenched tight. There was no technique to it, no skill. It was pure, raw power. He was going to smash her. He was going to knock her head right off her shoulders and be done with it. Chul wanted to look away, but he couldn't. His eyes were locked on the scene, his stomach a tight knot of dread. The fist shot forward. It was fast, much faster than something that big should be. Cut through the air straight towards Gina's face. This was it. This was the end. Gina did not move. She didn't try to block. She didn't try to duck. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, her body completely relaxed. Her eyes were open, watching the fist come at her. It was the most terrifying thing Chul had ever seen. It was like watching a person stand calmly in front of a speeding train. At the very last possible moment, a fraction of a second before impact, she moved. It was not a dodge. It was not an evasion. It was the smallest, most precise adjustment he had ever seen a human body make. She tilted her head, just a little, just an inch. It was enough. Volk's fist did not smash into her nose. It did not connect with a sickening crunch. The knuckles, meant to break bone, merely grazed the side of her temple. The main force of the blow, all that terrible power, passed harmlessly through the empty space where her head had just been. The effect on Volk was immediate. He had put his entire body into a blow that did not land. The momentum threw him forward, off balance. He stumbled a step, his own strength working against him. A grunt of surprise and effort was forced from his lungs, and in that same instant, as his arm was extended and his body was unstable, Gina moved again. Her hand came up. It was not a punch. It was not a chop. It was a gentle, almost delicate motion. Her first two fingers, held together, tapped lightly on the armored plating of Volk's own wrist. The spot she touched was a specific point on the complex vambrace he wore. The contact made a sound. It was a faint, clear, high-pitched chime. It was a beautiful sound, like a tiny, perfect bell. It was a sound that did not belong in a room full of violence and anger. The note hung in the air for a single, pure moment, and then it was gone. Gina's hand returned to her side. The entire sequence, from the missed punch to the gentle tap, had taken less than 2 seconds. Volk caught his balance. He stood there, panting, confused. He looked at his own fist, then at Gina. She was completely untouched. There was not a mark on her. She hadn't even broken a sweat. His face was a mixture of fury and complete bewilderment. He had missed. How could he have missed? Strike concluded, Gina stated. Her voice was the same as when she commented on a faulty wire. It was flat and factual. Then she did something even stranger. She looked at the spot on Volk's wrist where she had tapped. Then she turned her head and looked at the thruster component, which was still sitting on the anti-grav sled where the Jaxians had left it as evidence. She looked back at Volk. The resonant frequency is identical. No one spoke. No one understood. Gina continued, her explanation calm and clear, like a teacher with a slow student. The failure was in your own substandard armor alloy, Commander. It fatigued and transferred a harmonic fracture to the thruster housing. You didn't bring me a sabotaged part. You brought me your own engineering failure. She pointed at his wrist. When I tapped your armor, it chimed at a specific frequency. She pointed at the thruster. The fracture in that metal resonates at the exact same frequency. Your armor is shaking itself apart, and it shook your ship's thruster apart, too. My repair was correct. Your accusation is a lie to cover up your own people's mistake. The truth landed in the room not with a shout, but with a quiet, devastating clarity. Volk's face went pale. The angry red color drained from his scales, leaving a sickly gray-green behind. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked from his wrist to the thruster, his mind finally, horribly, putting the pieces together. She wasn't a saboteur. She was a diagnostician, and she had just used his own attack to diagnose the problem. Task Force Leader Kale, who had been watching everything with his unreadable dark eyes, now stepped forward. The look of curiosity was gone, replaced by a cold, hard understanding. He saw it all now. The false data, the bluster, the desperate attempt to shift blame. He turned to one of his guards. Scan his wrist armor. Full molecular resonance analysis. Now. The guard stepped forward with a handheld scanner. He passed it over the vambrace on Volk's wrist. The device beeped and whirred. A screen lit up with complex data. Then the guard scanned the fractured thruster housing. The data on the screen shifted and then it locked. 2 lines on the graph, representing the resonant frequencies of the 2 different pieces of metal, overlaid perfectly. They were identical. The guard looked up at Kale. Sir, he said, his voice full of awe. The frequencies are a perfect match. She's right. The fault is in the Jaxian armor alloy. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of tension, but the silence of shock and embarrassment. The security team looked at Volk with new eyes. No longer a victim, but a liar. Chul finally let out the breath he didn't know he was holding. He felt weak. He looked at Gina, this quiet woman from the engineering bay, and he understood nothing and everything all at once. She hadn't fought back. She had just proven her point, in the most terrifying way possible. For a long moment, no one in the room moved or spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the scanner in the guard's hand. The data on its screen was undeniable. 2 lines, 2 different pieces of metal, singing the same sad song of failure. Commander Volk looked like a different person. All the anger and pride had drained from his body, leaving behind a hollow shell. He stared at his own wrist armor as if it had betrayed him. In a way, it had. It had told the truth that he tried to hide. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Task Force Leader Kale was the first to break the stillness. He turned slowly to face the Jaxian commander. His gray face was like stone. Commander Volk, he said, his formal voice now cold and sharp. The evidence provided by your own person confirms the engineer's statement. You have filed a false report. You have committed an act of assault on a station resident. And you have attempted to obstruct justice. He gave a sharp nod to his guards. Place him under arrest. The security team, who moments before had been ready to take Gina, now moved with purpose toward Volk. They did not grab him roughly, but their hands were firm on his arms. Volk did not resist. He seemed too stunned, too ashamed to even speak. He allowed himself to be turned around and guided from the room without a single word of protest. The large, intimidating commander was led away, a defeated figure. Kale watched him go. Then he turned to Gina. He straightened his uniform. His large, dark eyes held a new emotion, a deep and profound respect. He bowed his head slightly, a formal gesture not common among his people. "Engineer Gina," he said, his voice much softer now. "On behalf of the Galactic Union Station Oasis, I offer my most sincere apologies. The Union is in your debt. Your method of proof was unorthodox, but it was effective." He paused, searching for the right words. "Is there anything you require? Reparation for the threat against your person?" Gina shook her head. The calm on her face had not changed since the moment she walked in. The confrontation, the violent attack, the revelation. None of it had seemed to touch her. "No," she said simply. "My workbench requires my attention." She turned to leave, as if the entire dramatic event had been a minor distraction in her day. But Chul could not move. He was still trying to process what he had seen. The impossible calm. The tiny head tilt that avoided certain death. The gentle tap that revealed a universal truth. It wasn't just skill. It was something else. It was a level of understanding of the physical world that went far beyond any engineer he had ever known. His mind raced, trying to find a box to put her in. The stories he had heard, the legends from the war that he always thought were just stories for children. They came flooding back. Tales of pilots who didn't just control machines, but became one with them. Soldiers who could hear the song of metal and machinery. Veterans of the silent front, the terrible war that had secured humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't called soldiers, they were called drivers. They piloted the great machines, the walking fortresses known as frames. He remembered the news videos, grainy and old, showing human-shaped giants of metal standing against planet-killing horrors. The pilots were always a mystery. Most never showed their faces. They were ghosts, legends. And then he remembered how Gina had fixed the thruster. She hadn't just welded it. She had changed its very nature, taught it to sing a different song. She had listened to the fracture that it all clicked into place with a force that made him dizzy. His eyes wide, his voice barely a whisper, he spoke her name. "Gina." She paused and looked back at him. Chul's mouth was dry. He gestured weakly, his hand encompassing the whole incredible scene. The silent front. You were a frame driver? A Titan driver. He used the old, almost mythical titles. The people who didn't just fight in the war but who ended it. The people who were more than human. Gina looked at him. For the first time that day, her expression changed. It was not a big change. It was just a slight softening around her eyes. It wasn't a smile. It was something sadder and much older. It was the look of someone remembering a painful, distant dream. She did not confirm it. She did not deny it. She did not give a speech about her past glories. She simply held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. In that silence, in that small, sad smile, Chul found his answer. It was yes. The confirmation was more powerful than any words. The quiet engineer from the bay, the woman who liked her tea a certain way and who was patient with his mistakes, had once piloted a god of war. She had stood against nightmares. She had seen things that would break a normal person. And she had chosen to come here, to this noisy, greasy station, to build and fix things instead of breaking them. Her. Volk's attack wasn't a life or death struggle. It was just a data point, a single, clumsy note in a symphony of violence she had conducted long ago. She had assessed the threat, calculated the trajectory, and solved the problem with the most minimal effort required. For her, it was probably as simple as tightening a loose bolt. Task Force leader Kale had also heard Chul's question. He looked at Gina with a new, dawning horror and respect. He was a security officer. He knew the stories too. He understood now that he had not just been accusing an engineer. He had been threatening a living relic of human history, a national treasure that could have dismantled his entire team without raising her voice. Gina turned away from Chul's stunned face. She looked at the thruster housing one last time. "The Jaxians will need to recall all units with that alloy series," she said to Kale, her voice back to its practical engineering tone. "The harmonic decay is systemic. It will only get worse." Then she started walking toward the door, back in the direction of the engineering bay. She was done here. The office door hissed shut behind Gina, leaving a profound silence in her wake. Chul stood frozen, his mind echoing with the unspoken confirmation. A frame driver. He had been taking tools from a Titan driver. He had complained to her about being tired. The thought made his face feel hot with a mix of embarrassment and awe. Task Force Leader Kale was also staring at the closed door. The formal posture of the security chief was gone. He looked like a man who had just realized he had accidentally pointed a weapon at a sleeping volcano. He slowly turned to Chul. "That one," Kale began, his voice unusually quiet. "She is more than she appears." It was the biggest understatement Chul had ever heard. He just nodded, unable to find any words. Kale straightened his uniform, trying to regain his professional composure. He gestured to the thruster component. "We will secure this as evidence for the official inquiry against Commander Volk." He looked at Chul, his dark eyes serious. "You will ensure she faces no professional repercussions for today. Her service record, whatever it may be, is clearly beyond our clearance. And her help was invaluable." Chul managed another nod. "Yes, sir. I will." Kale gave a short, respectful bow of his head, not to Chul, but in the direction Gina had gone. Then he and his remaining guards left the office, taking the thruster with them. The bird-like attendant slowly peeked out from behind the counter. Its feathers ruffled suddenly. The room felt very empty and very quiet. Chul was alone with the ghost of what had just happened. The air still seemed to vibrate with the memory of Volk's punch and the clear, chiming sound of Gina's fingers on his armor. He took a deep, shaky breath. He needed to move. His legs felt weak, but he forced them to carry him out of the admin sector. He walked through the clean, bright halls, but he didn't see them. His mind was replaying everything. The calm offer, the terrifying lunge, the impossible, tiny movement. The truth revealed not with a shout, but with a whisper of sound. By the time he reached the noisy, familiar chaos of the engineering bay, the rumor mill was already in full swing. Whispers followed him as he walked. He heard snippets. "Face down the Jaxian commander. Volk arrested instead." She didn't even lift a hand. Everyone was looking at Gina's usual workbench. She was already there, of course. She had her back to the crowd, bent over a disassembled primary heat exchanger. Her posture was exactly the same as it had been this morning, and every morning before that. It was as if she had simply stepped out for a cup of tea and returned. She was pointing at a component with a laser tool, speaking softly to a young apprentice who was staring at her with wide, worshipful eyes. "The flow is restricted here," Gina said, her voice perfectly calm. "You must clear the channel before you reseal the housing. Do not rush the foundation." The apprentice nodded so vigorously it looked like his head might fall off. Chul stopped a few feet away, just watching her. The grease stains on her coveralls, the practical way she tied her hair back, the focused expression. It was all the same, but he saw her completely differently now. The calm wasn't just patience. It was the stillness of a deep ocean. The focus wasn't just concentration. It was the precision of a guided missile. She finished her instruction and the apprentice scurried away. Gina picked up a hydrospanner and began methodically cleaning the heat exchanger's parts. She did not look up at Chul, but she knew he was there. "Are you going to stand there all cycle, Chul?" she asked, her tone mild. "We have a primary heat exchanger to recalibrate. The station won't cool itself." Her voice was the same. It was still the voice of his senior, his teacher. But now he heard the layers underneath. He heard the patience of someone who had commanded a machine as tall as a building. He heard the focus of someone who had once balanced the fate of worlds on her decisions. He walked over to the workbench, picking up a tool. His hands were still a little unsteady. I didn't know," he said softly. Gina finally paused her work and looked at him. Her gaze was steady and clear. "That is the way it should be," she said. "The past is a heavy tool. You only take it out when you have no other choice." She returned to her work, and after a moment, Chul did the same. The familiar sounds of the bay slowly returned to his ears. The clanging, the hissing, the shouted conversations. But something had changed. The other mechanics didn't crowd Gina, but they looked at her with a new, profound respect. They didn't see a mystery anymore. They saw a protector. Chul understood now. Humanity's place in the galaxy hadn't been won by politicians or traders. It had been bought and paid for by people like Gina. People who had seen the very worst the universe could offer and had not broken. People who had done terrible, necessary things so that others could live in peace. And then, the greatest among them had put down their weapons, picked up a hydrospanner, and chosen to build things instead. They chose to fix the small, broken parts of the universe, one quiet repair at a time. He looked at Gina, calmly cleaning a simple machine, and he felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought tears to his eyes. This was what humanity, fuck yeah, really meant. It wasn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It was about having the strength to be quiet. It was about having the power to destroy and choosing to create instead. He picked up a calibration meter. "So," he said, his voice finding its strength again. "The primary coupling on the heat exchanger. You said it was misaligned." Gina gave a small, almost invisible nod. "Yes, by 0.2 degrees. Let me show you how to find it. And together they went back to work.